EcoMod Network Voices. I'm Ryan Smith. We're excited to have you back here for another episode where we will talk with an industry expert. This time it's actually an academic expert. I'm also joined, as usual, by my partner, Ivan Rupnik. Ivan, want to say hello?
Hi, Ryan.
And
hi, everybody.
Our guest today is John Quale. John is chair and professor at University of New Mexico School of Architecture. John, thank you for coming.
Happy to be here.
John's going to introduce himself a little bit and show some slides, and then we'll have a discussion about offsite construction from the perspective of environmental impact. John, go right ahead. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your story?
Sure. So I got interested in offsite construction before I knew that it was called offsite construction. When I was involved in the solar decathlon, the very first one, and I learned a lot of lessons in that experience because what we designed for that solar decathlon was a building called the Trojan Goat. And this is when I was at University of Virginia. And in that process, I realized that the sizes of transporting things was really important. We were too high, too wide, too tall, and too heavy. So we had to get a military transport person to take us into Washington, D.C. And immediately I realized, well, it also was like $350,000 to do this whole project. And after I did that, I decided I want to do affordability, I want to do environmental responsibility, and I wanted to test the limitations of prefabrication and see what we could do. And so when I started up the EcoMod project, those were the things that I cared about. And so from there, I've been involved in a variety of other things. I'm not showing the slides right now because I don't have images that I can do about that, but I was involved as a legal expert in a very high profile case, and spent 2 years of my life going back and forth, traveling to various places to make the case that the intellectual property was stolen from another company. And so that was interesting, and I learned a lot more in that context as well. I mean, that's how I feel generally about why I do this, is because I want to learn how to teach this. And so that's how EcoMod also got started. And let me go ahead and share my screen now. And there we are. Can you see it? Nope. Okay, I'm gonna put on the full.
You can see it, but you have to just blow it up.
Yeah. There we go. So let me jump past these things. So this is the first team. And they really, I was still naive about how to deal with this. The students were really naive about how to deal with this. And we had a great experience. They learned a lot. That we had to move our original site, to an entirely different site, which was like 90 degrees off of, the sun that we had in the original site. It was very, very frustrating. This is the interior of that first home. We had to figure out ways to make modules that could get to that site, because it was a very narrow street. And so we had 8 modules, and they were very narrow. They were 12 by 18s and stacked, next to each other. And then we had the opportunity from the author John Grisham to support an EcoMod home. He was living in Charlottesville at the time, and he wanted us to do one in Mississippi right after Katrina. And so that was a panelized one. It was a very difficult one to do because it was 900 miles away from where I was at UVA at the time. So I had to take the whole team down to Mississippi and did this panelized thing. And then here's another view of it. But then one of the faculty members at Mississippi State, which was not too far away, took her students to go look at this house. And they arrived, and this was a Habitat home, and it was it had been completely taken apart and disassembled, except for the roof, which had PVs on it, like the most valuable thing you could possibly want. We also did, this is a historic home that was in terrible shape. I should have put the original image on there of how bad it looked, but it got fixed up with a contractor and students who did kind of finish work because of the complexities of the structure. So these are the interior views. We wanted to hold on to the existing pieces. We used prefabricated roof panels because the roof was leaking, and then behind that is the accessory dwelling unit. It's a 398 square foot home. It is the smallest LEED platinum building in the world. And I checked with that recently to make sure that it was still the smallest one. And this is the interior of it. There were 2 modules there. We had pop outs and various things. And going back to here, there is a trellis, which now is fully overgrown with vines. And the guy who still lives there, I went back for the 100th anniversary of UVA's architecture department. He saw me as I was walking by. I just wanted to go see because I'm in New Mexico now, and I wanted to go see these homes. And so I went, and the guy who rents it, he had a $5 electrical bill that month. And we could not believe that, but he showed it to me. He showed me the bill. So I care a great deal about affordability in addition to sustainability and prefabrication. And in this that tiny little building means a lot to me. There's the inside, a little pop out. Then we did a project for a Habitat, again, it was a Habitat for Humanity project. And we had 2 people from Afghanistan, and they had no children. And so there was just 2 bedrooms. That's how Habitat, how many people do you need and all that. It turns out that they ended up having twins in their 40s. And so they suddenly had 2 kids of different genders in that bedroom, that back bedroom on the left there. And and they both worked in the School of Architecture at UVA as one was the husband was dealing with trash, and the wife was a custodian there as well. And one day when I was still at UVA, she was going through, and I'm like, "What are you doing here?" She said, "Oh, well, I work here." It's very strange. So I love the ability to get to know these people and do community engagement in this process as well. I think it's really important that happens. Actually, there was an article in the New York Times right after I moved to New Mexico saying that somebody was driving by the house and saw the front of the house and thought it was ugly, and it was a New York Times op-ed. and one of my colleagues at UVA called me up, Bill Sherman, and said, "Have you seen the New York Times?" And I mean, I get the New York Times on Sunday, and so I opened it up and like, oh my God. Anyways, it ended up leading me into a more deeper assessment of community engagement. Then we took that house and we turned it into Passive House Standard with a company, Cardinal Homes, in the southern part of the state. And we did 3 homes that 2 were Passive House Standard and 1 was kind of a comparison home, which just had basic standard construction, so we could make the comparison. And we were so excited because this was a team. I actually had a research team on this one. And they put in monitors and various things and did analysis on all of that. And we had a lot of engineering students involved in that one. And so what happened then is that the monitors stopped working. And then right after that was when, I had to reconsider some things. And we also did a project where we were focusing on taking that EcoMod 4 home and adapting it to 2 different locations. Those were the renderings. That's what the houses looked like when I last saw them right before I moved to New Mexico. And it won one of those awards in Architect Magazine, and we're like, cool, that's great. There's some interior views real quick. But the main thing is that we really focused on airflow and ventilation and trying to, because this is a southern part of Virginia where it's a lot more humid, and it was difficult to do some of that analysis because at the same time we wanted the house to be exactly the same that was up in the mountains. And so we got a passive house consultant to work with us on that, and she did a fantastic job. And we were able to make it work. It involved the window placements more than anything else. And so here's some examples that came out of that analysis, and how she had to turn the buildings in slightly different ways so that it was possible for it to meet Passive House Standard. And by the way, not only did we get the Passive House Standard, we also, that consultant, she got an award for the rigor of her analysis from FIAS, the Passive House Standard group in the US. And she had worked for the guy who started the Passive House Standard in Germany. She was a grad student there, and she's great. I still stay in touch with her. Real quick, this is us doing those homes that were multiples. The 3 homes, 2 passive house, and 1 just basic standard construction. We had intensive meetings. I mean, it was, when you're doing modular, it's not easy to do Passive House Standard. And this team took it on. When I first got involved in this, I thought, well, there's no way these guys are going to know what they're doing. And no, they got it. They totally understood it. And that's, again, another learning opportunity for me. I always felt like that's what I want to be doing at all times, learning something new. There they are going on the trailer, being placed down. This was the most complex moment right there. That thing was hanging in the air a foot off the foundation because there were little odd things that kept happening as we kept trying to put it down because of the Passive House Standard. And it ended up, a good thing. We got some poplar bark as the kind of facade, part of the facade of the building. Everything had to be fully accessible, meaning it was 2 stories, but there was a fully accessible bedroom on the lower level. We had to increase the size of that home from the earlier version of it. There's my research assistant in front of that White House. He now works at, what's their names? The firm in Austin, a well-known firm that does sustainability, and I'm spacing on their name right now. So that's the comparison between on the left is the ones we did, down in southern part of the state. And this is, on the right, is the original home, EcoMod 4, that we were inspired by. So you can see that there were some changes in the window placements and that kind of stuff. And that's our client. We had 2 different nonprofits we were working with. This was the client for one of them. And so University of New Mexico, real quick. So when we started in New Mexico, it was a real challenge. There hadn't been a design build program at all. And they did little things in the Fab Lab and that kind of stuff. But this team that you can see here, they did a fantastic job of kind of jumping in and doing a really wonderful design. The main focus was on water management and the site, because the weather is actually pretty moderate here. It's not, like I said earlier, it's high elevation and all of that. And so we ended up trying to get as many breezes as we could through the building, and we were also collecting water on the roof in a diagonal line across it. It had that's what that weird structure looks like up there. That's to form this kind of folded roof to take the water diagonally to the far corner. The last one that was completed is EcoMod Rise. This was with the local community college. We ended up working with them because they had great building trades. They didn't treat us very well. The people who managed the financial side of the community college, they were pretty obnoxious to our students, unfortunately. And so I don't plan on working with them again. That's what the rendering is what we aspired to, and I won't show you the picture of how it turned out. It was the students and the people at C&M kind of took it over, and it wasn't, that team, it's very fresh in my mind because this is somewhat recent. I was pissed off. I was really pissed off. I won't go into that beyond that. So this is our current home with a habitat, and this is Zulu. And I think it's one of our best designs we've done. It has a variety of strategies for a very, very small home. This is with Santa Fe Habitat for Humanity. And there's a really serious issue with affordability in Santa Fe. And so they have actually purchased property, a relatively large subdivision in a sense. And we're doing a home, that is still not completed because we had to stop construction in March. And this fall, I'll be doing a seminar to finish that construction. And we'll be getting students in there to finish this off. Some of them they were 4th-year students, and a lot of them are returning into the grad program. So I'm hoping I'm going to get some of the same people. Here's some other quick images, a really interesting little design, a partition. And they were a brilliant team. There's the floor plan there. Pretty straightforward, very, very small. We had to go through the HOA process and all of that, which is great learning for our students to do. I actually tasked it to one of the smarter students, who's really, really excited about this idea. And so this ooh, that was an out of sequence image there. So dealing with residential modular construction, one of the things that I started to do when I visited plants was to gather data from those companies when I could. In some cases, they would not give any data. And in other times we could get some decent information, but they said that it had to be private. It can only be used for determining, results, and not have people know, where they got those results from. And, you all know this kind of stuff. You know what these things are. Ultimately, in 2011, I worked with a team, myself, Matthew Eckelman, who's now at Northeastern, and Kyle Williams, who went to Stanford. I don't know what happened after that. And Julie Zimmerman, who's still at Yale, and who was a colleague of mine at UVA, in the sense that she was in civil engineering and I was in architecture, and we got to know each other. And Greg Sladitsky has been really at the core of all of this, because Greg's just Greg. I get emails from him like at least once a week. Random things, maybe not about modular at all. You probably all are shaking your head, getting the same thing. But he's a wonderful guy, and I feel very lucky because he loves EcoMod, and so he will fly to New Mexico. He would fly to anywhere, for EcoMod. He just thinks it's such a great scenario, which I think is fun. And so there were basically two papers that came out of this. The Construction Matters one, which I'm happy to share when you distribute this. These two papers, I'd be happy to share those. And I also have a paper. When I had a Fulbright at University of Tokyo, and I think, Ryan, you might have met with them when you went. And in that process, there's a guy named Gando-san who was at another university and then has now at University of Tokyo again, and he's involved in dealing with these similar topics. In fact, he's got a paper that shows up in ResearchGate, which I wasn't aware that he was doing that. I thought he was going off and doing other things. But so I'm hoping that there can be some papers that come out of what you all are doing, the balance between sustainability and dealing with offsite construction. And unfortunately, the second one was not, it was peer reviewed by the lead team, but it wasn't reviewed, in an academic sense in the same way. But it was a good paper. And so the other thing is, with modular construction, you inherently have connections. You need to have modules, which means that you are kind of duplicating some structure compared to a conventional building. And so one of the cases that we tried to make was, you put in a temporary wall, and that's what the dashed lines are. You can take away that structure once you attach it properly. And with pictures of that, these are always useful when I show the students, because they're like, wow, that's a lot of wood there. I'm like, yeah, but it's a building. And so the residential results are shown here, and they show a pretty significant difference from on-site construction. That's the other main thing we always try to do, is compare on-site versus off-site. And this was, I can't tell you who gave us this information, but it was really rigorous information that they had. And then and these were single family homes, and so then I went around to single family home builders who were sustainably oriented, and tried to get the same kind of data from them. And so that's basically driving to Home Depot 3 times a day, because they're pickup truck contractors, and those kinds of things where they were shocked when I showed them the information and did the comparison. And we wanted to get more. I think we only had about 4 or 5 that we got this from the sampling, but it was shocking, because I honestly did not think this is how this was going to turn out. And then the commercial study was similar. If you look at the bottom at the totals, we had a little less data from the commercial. There were 2 or 3 multi-family housing complexes that we had information from, and we tried to put them together and make the comparison from, because these were companies that also had done on-site construction, had done multi-story, I don't know, maybe 5-story homes in a low-income part of New York City, and we had to kind of make that comparison. We looked at the size of the trucks. We looked at how much gas they might use, parking in the parking lots, all that kind of stuff. It added up, and it ended up still playing out pretty well for offsite. And oops, sorry. So this is where we've done work so far. Lots of places. We've actually done some rehab, eco remod, we call that, but this is not relevant necessarily for this topic. But we ended up trying to pursue a variety of topics and ways of thinking about these things. And you saw that already. Oh, so this is the whole partnership where we did the 3 homes that were passive house standard, that kind of sets up for that. And that's pretty much it. We can kind of go into the conversation.
That'd be good. Well, thanks a lot, John. That was a really eye-opening presentation, particularly the data at the end. I was going to just a quick follow-up question about the single family, where the difference is so big. Is it because, do you think, and I'm just speculating, do you think it's because is there something to do with the fact that single family modular has been around for longer as well? So there's more of an optimization, or the scale of it, or because the multifamily, I mean, they're both better, but it's shockingly better with single family. Is there, I mean, I'm just guessing, do you have any hunches?
Well, that was actually something Julie and I talked about, and we were a little bit worried about it, and it ended up, we dug back into the data, and I'm not a big data guy. I try to lay out strategies and ideas about how to gather data, and great with an Excel spreadsheet. So I always find someone who's really good with an Excel spreadsheet.
That's all it takes.
and so, but yeah, we had a conversation about that, and we were worried about it. But when we went back in, it seemed like it was fair.
No, I think it's we've seen it. Well, and also I guess the question too is whether it's single family subdivisions, or whether it's actually a single family, like, are these buildings being built in a subdivision, or are they, because those efficiencies are huge, whereas the single, I mean, it's interesting, but I think it's really worth digging in. Maybe that actually even the bigger question, and I think one of the things we've been trying to understand, and you're really at the forefront of, is we've seen, for example, NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab,
Yeah.
they've come to modular, and it's great. It's amazing that finally like a federal program is looking at offsite. We haven't seen a lot of that. But it seems mostly focused on a very clear research question, which is they want to achieve passive house standard, and their interest is in looking at modular and offsite construction as a way, because of the precision of factory construction, to achieve it easier. But there isn't, and so that's great. But it's interesting on the other hand that this kind of the embodied energy, the performance of the construction as the performance of the building, seems like something that really isn't. You're really out there, at least in the U.S. context. There's not even close to even the interest, not to mention the research that you would think to look at the environmental impacts of construction footprint as opposed to building footprint. Now we know, it's important that we look at building performance, but the actual construction itself uses up probably more resources. And so it's interesting. I don't know. It seems like the building performance side gets a lot of attention. The construction performance side, you're it. You're in the avant-garde in this. So what do you think about that? Like, how do we get that side to grow? How do we get the federal government to take more issue with that? Where the building performance side is getting really much more serious. The construction performance side, not so much.
For a while there, I was on the U.S. Green Building Council Board of Directors. And I brought up these kinds of topics in that context because, inevitably those board meetings are board meetings where you have to approve the budget and you have to decide, are we going to hire this person or that person? And I just kept saying, no, wait, we're talking about buildings here. Let's actually talk about them. And I brought up the studies that that I had. That was before I went onto the board, and it was really interesting to be able to dig into that and understand that, like, for example, when you're dealing with waste. That was like one of the big things when I first got started doing this. It was all about waste. Well, there's no waste with modular. Well, yeah, okay, that's fine, but is that important at the level that performance should be focused on? I just feel climate change is real, and I've got a cousin who thinks it's not, but really, I really want to make sure that the students that I teach understand that this is, a real thing. We actually need to think about climate change. In fact, I'm teaching a studio this summer, starting next week, where it is offsite commercial housing for the students in the School of Architecture and Planning. And there'll be a bridge that will connect across from the parking lot and also to the gym the other direction. And, and it is going to be high performance. That's the requirement. I kind of put out passive house standard as one of the methods of doing it. I hope that most of them will take to it. And I don't know. We'll see. It should be interesting. I don't know. What other questions?
Well, but quantify. Don't you think that? When you start to show some of those numbers, I share your concern for the future of the planet. But I think some of those numbers also indicate economic, beyond the future and the current present. And we know that construction productivity is very low. It just costs more to take that many trips. So why isn't there better data on that? Because that seems like just a no-brainer. It's just more expensive. Yes, it also hurts us in the future, and in terms of global warming. But like that many pickup truck trips. Anyway, I feel like again, like we understand, why isn't there a passive house equivalent standard for the actual process of construction? Because the passive house standard is for the performance of a building. Why is the performance of construction? Anyway, it's just
why you want to put them together.
Well, yeah. anyway, it's just a thought. Again, seeing your research makes me always think of why we don't have that. I mean, it seems like it would be. I mean, some of LEED deals with it as if it was an afterthought, but it's
Yeah,
still
I mean,
building. It's like the building as a machine, and as opposed to the construction process as an ecology. And it's we know that it's a much bigger impact. Anyway, I thought you
yeah,
might have some thoughts for the audience in terms of what we should be doing. And what federal government should be doing too. HUD is interested now. DOE is interested. All these folks, the forestry sector is interested, but there's not a clear. We copied Passive House from Germany. What's that Europe is about to start doing something with CO2 and building performance. What do we need to do to get more data?
one little bit of correction there is that Passive House didn't come from Germany. It actually was the super insulated homes in the US and Canada that evolved into Passive House.
And then came back. Well, that happens.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, because I know that because of the German Passive House consultant, and she worked for the guy, and she confirmed that as well. It was interesting. I do think that it's important for us to, especially right now in this pandemic, everyone's doing this. I think it's really essential that we be thinking about affordability in various ways. I think it's important that we be thinking about climate change, again, in various ways. And we want to make sure that we are respectful of the community or the individuals that are going to be living or working in these places. And I don't know, I just find like that is such a essential thing to be doing. And let's just hope that we don't end up with the re-elected president. But sorry, I hope I'm not offending anybody, but I do think that there needs to be federal action on this. And I don't think that there's an easy way to avoid that. And so I don't know, I really feel strongly that we need to respect people, we need to respect the environment, and we need to understand the opportunities in offsite construction. And that's, this is going to only be how many times have I done a studio that isn't an EcoMod one, but is about offsite construction? I think it's maybe only my third one that I've done. EcoMod, it's kind of I'm used to it. I know how to do it. Lately, I've actually been hiring others to teach the studio and I do the seminar so that I can make sure that they're being rigorous about it. And I just think this generation, I think if we can be optimistic about this, my kids are so much more open-minded than I am. My daughter cares about climate change. My son cares about climate change, and I don't even really talk to them about it. They know I do it, but they don't want to talk about it. They just do it. They're interested. My daughter's in this amazing high school where it's a very progressive school. They learn everything, humanities in particular, but they also have focused on climate change. And it's one of those things where, I'm optimistic about the future. I'm crossing my fingers as I say that. But I honestly think that this is an important moment right now, because we're already seeing the effects of climate change. And if we don't try to reverse that, or at least minimize it, I really think we're in trouble.
John, I really appreciate that sentiment. And it's clear you're passionate about this topic, and that's why we invited you on. Just as a summary for the listeners, John's study we're going to be posting, but some of the major findings there, right, just as a brief summary, is that yes, offsite construction saves on material wastage, but one of the defining factors John found and his team is related to the transportation component of workers going to and from to pick up materials, go here and there, versus a factory where the workers go to the factory and they work, right? And that was a large environmental savings. To the topic of sort of tactical methods, because we have an audience, John, that's people who are doing this day in and day out, and are trying to find answers and solutions. What would you say to an offsite manufacturer or an architect or an owner that wants to get involved in this area or is currently involved in using volumetric modular construction or panelized methods? What would you say to them with regards to trying to assess or trying to determine whether one method was more environmentally sound than another method? Is there anything that they can do? Are there tools available to them or consultants? How might they go down the path of whether it's on the aggressive side, living building challenge, passive house, or on the other side, just sort of baby steps into it? Any recommendations there?
I really think that that we should, when we're dealing with volumetric, we want as much as possible completed when it leaves the factory, because it minimizes the time, which minimizes the travel, which minimizes the transportation of materials, because they get shipped to the factory and then they're already going to the building. So I think as much as possible, minimize the amount of additional construction that needs to happen on site. That's I don't have definitive evidence about that, but that's one thing I want to do as I go forward, is to make sure that can be, I feel pretty solid about that instinct, but I'd like to be able to maybe work with some of you and come up with solutions that and enough data to be able to prove that. I mean, it's a complex thing. A lot of people just don't they still think of the term prefab, which I want to thank Ryan for saying it's offsite. Exactly. And so it's that kind of characterization. Like, my mother-in-law is in her 80s, and right nearby where she lives in England, she there's these little mini prefab homes, and and they're called prefabs, and so when I talk to her about what I do, because I had the fellowship in Tokyo, but I also had one at Cambridge, and the people at Cambridge were just like, this is really important, and they were already kind of there. And it was already something that they, it's very sophisticated, things going on in the UK as much as there are going on in Japan. And I just think, like, the US should be able to be like the top at this. We should be able to be the most sophisticated and be able to develop efficient, intelligent strategies to minimize the construction on site, which minimizes a lot of other things. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
It does. And, you've really been a leader over time in not just this topic of offsite and modular, but, the community engaged, affordable housing aspect. Been really impressed over the years. So much of professional education, whether that's to architects, engineers, or construction managers, or anyone involved in the built environment planning, interior design, tends to be fairly normative, but also speculative and conceptual. And what you've been doing in your work is to try to take some of those lessons directly on to the ground and say, we're going to do this, and we're going to show you how difficult it is to actually pull this off, right? And I think the perseverance your students have shown, as they've gone on to join offices at Lake Flato or Shop Architects or construction companies or even offsite
Oh, you
manufacturing
looked these
companies.
up already. Good.
Yeah, is impressive. And so, you know, it's a great model for education as well, that you've been able to introduce to students and affect so many over time. I want to thank you for joining us today, John, and of course, Ivan, as usual. Modex thanks you for being our network voice. We have learned a lot today, and we hope to have you again some other time. Appreciate you coming.
Yeah. Take care.